Hello Christian. First of all, I really want to thank you quickly for the extra time you gave me and Johan to do our oral presentation. It really means a lot. Both me and my dad are doing fine now. We don't have any more symptoms of COVID, so yeah, that's good. All right, so let's get right into the presentation. Me and Johan's lesson is actually a project of 6 classes, basically. Our project is for secondary 3 level students that are in an intensive program of English. So the level of English in our class is going to be pretty high. So our project is actually for pretty advanced students, I would say. All right, so the project is going to be on 6 classes. The first class will be just the warm up. We will also do the introduction, the plot summary, and describe the characters. So we would present them with our own story, as well as introducing the classical narrative. What is the classical narrative to them? And yeah, for the warm up, what we will do though is just present a couple narratives. We will go. We can go over all of those I wrote in there, but I think for what you would do, what we could possibly do is just go over the main ones. For example, I think fantasy is a pretty big one to talk about. Myths, legend, all of those are pretty common. So we could go over the main ones. If we have extra time and everything, we could talk about all the other ones. But for our setup for our project, I think for the warm up, we could talk about the main one and explain them. Obviously I won't explain them to you since you already know all of them, but I think that's a pretty cool warm-up we could do in a class setting for students. Now we would introduce and present all the activities we would do in the 6 classes, basically, with the students, and we would introduce them to the classical narrative. So yeah, so the classical narrative structure is the most common one in storytelling for mainstream films and all that. So it's based on a 3-act format that organizes story in the following way. So that's what we would tell the students. We would tell them that the first act in a classical narrative story is the setup. This setup here, well, we're introduced to the main characters of the story. What are their goals, their obstacles, what they're trying to achieve, what is their objective. Also, we're introduced to who is the protagonist, who is going to try to avoid the heroes accomplishing their goals. So yeah, the setup basically sets up the story. Yes, so it sets up the story so that the story engages the attention of the audience and suggests the story's likely development. So yeah, that's the setup for the classical narrative. Now, the development. Well, here the plot gets a lot of complications added to the story. There's an increasing sense of urgency that is created when the main characters encounter more and more obstacles that stand in their way. Usually those obstacles come from the protagonist, the villain. So yeah, the development also often includes a false resolution to the main conflict set up in Act 1. Once this false resolution has been encountered, the action in the movie generally points inevitably towards a necessary climax. So in the development, we will see that the heroes and the villain will have to come fight together and will have to set a victor apart. There won't be any other options. So now in the resolution, this is where the climax will happen. The story main conflict comes to dramatic confrontation. This is called the climax. It is the point where an eventual victor is decided between the villain and the heroes. Following this climax, a closure is introduced into the story, which simply means we're gonna know who won, basically, and it's gonna solve any other issues that was in the story. And usually, for a classical narrative, the victor will be the heroes. So now that our students know about the classical narrative, we would present them with our own story that we made. So yeah, the story that we made was very simple, very straightforward. The setup is just 3 unsatisfied citizens that wants to overcome a dictator in their country. Their objective is to free the population and be the dictator. So yeah, the heroes. So the heroes are 3 guys: Brendan, Eric, and Logan. they're three friends, and just by simply talking about their situation in their country, they realize they have to do something and overcome the dictator. We would just to describe a little bit the heroes. Brendan is the brave guy. He's the leader of the group. He's good looking. He's kind of he's just the leader. And Eric, he's a brilliant guy, ingenious, very crafty, very nerdy guy. He comes up with plans and ideas all the time. Logan would be our strong fighter. Like, he's tall, he's very muscular, and he's basically the arms just the arms of the three guys, and he's gonna fight. And yeah, so he's not the smart guy, but he's just gonna put his heart into the plans, and he's gonna fight anyone who comes in their way. So their objective is to take back the control of the country, and better the way of life for every citizen. So yeah, those three heroes are going on a journey to basically take control of the country and make life better for everyone. The dictator is Errolf Miller. The dictator is just a classic dictator. He's smart and evil, and he manipulates the population into thinking what he's doing is fine, but in reality, he's just a dictator. So yeah, in our story, he just tries everything to make sure the heroes just are not able to gain control of the country. He tries everything to make sure that the heroes are not able to accomplish their objective, just like in a classical narrative story. So yeah, we decided to go very straightforward, very simple. In the development, the heroes managed to convince the population to rise against the dictator, but unfortunately, Errol keeps sending assassins and in their way to try and kill them and prevent them from accomplishing their objective. So that's a little quick development we add. Once again, very straightforward, very simple. Because obviously we don't want to like have something too complicated, as a classical narrative is just classic. You know, it's usually the same kind of pattern. So we decided to go with a pretty straightforward story. The resolution is a big fight. The resolution is the big fight. The climax happen. The dictator and their heroes fight, and basically, obviously, the heroes, with the help of the population, manage to take out the dictator and take the control of the country. So yeah, that's the resolution. Once again, very simple resolution. In the end, the heroes manage to make the life better for every citizen, and yeah, they live happily ever after. Just a classic conclusion. So now after that, for the class, now that the students know about a classical narrative and they learned about a normal story, how it goes, in the next class we can do a grammar and vocabulary lesson on this. So we would ask the students to write a very short classical story in teams. So they would write their own little stories, just kind of like the one we did. Obviously, in a class, you would really give more description, more detailed story. But for the presentation, we made it very clear and simple for you to understand what we were doing. But yeah, for our students, we would ask them in teams to write just a very short classical narrative story. And the activity would be for them to identify the vocabulary that relates to the classical narrative aspect. So when they write a story, in the end, they would just try to identify the classical narrative aspect of their story. And then at the end of the class, the teacher could read every story and help students understand what relates to the narrative, the classical narrative. So yeah, that would be our vocabulary lesson. So yeah, that's about it for me. The rest of the presentation will be done by Yohan. So yeah, thank you very much.